The morning of November 14th, 1944, 3rd Armoured Division, somewhere east of Aachen, Germany. Sergeant Bill Preston's M4 Sherman lurched forward through the mud, engine roaring at full governed speed, tracks biting into the rain-soaked earth. Through his gunner's periscope, Preston watched a Panzer IV emerge from behind a farmhouse 700 yards ahead. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to find solid ground, to halt before firing as doctrine demanded, as training prescribed, as German tankers always did. But Preston didn't stop. His right hand stayed steady on the gyrostabilizer control box. His left adjusted elevation through the hydraulic cylinder connected to the 75mm gun. The Sherman bucked over a crater. The gun stayed locked on target. Preston's finger found the firing button. The 75mm round left the barrel at 2,300 feet per second while the Sherman was still moving at 15 miles per hour across broken ground. The Panzer's right track exploded in a shower of metal. Before the German crew could react, Preston's loader had chambered another round. Still moving, still stabilized. The second shot penetrated the Panzer's side armor. The German tank burned. Preston's Sherman never stopped moving. This single engagement, multiplied across thousands of encounters during the final year of the war, represented something German tank doctrine could not comprehend. American tankers had discovered that the piece of equipment their own army barely understood, the Westinghouse gyrostabilizer that German engineers had tested and dismissed as unnecessarily complex, gave them a decisive advantage that transcended armor thickness or gun caliber. They learned to fight while moving, and in doing so, they rewrote the mathematics of armored combat in ways that would echo through tank warfare for the next 8 decades. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The stabilizer that changed everything was invented by Clinton R. Hanna, a research engineer at Westinghouse Electric, in response to a 1939 U.S. Ordnance Department request for a method to stabilize tank guns over rough terrain. Early prototypes in 1941 used 2 gyroscopes, but Hanna perfected a single gyro solution he called the anticipating gyro, which could sense and correct for gun movement before significant displacement occurred. By 1942, the Army was testing the stabilizer under combat conditions. In 1942, Hanna received a presidential citation for this work. By 1943, every M4 Sherman except those mounting the 105mm howitzer came equipped with the Westinghouse gyrostabilizer as standard equipment. The system itself was mechanically elegant and operationally sophisticated beyond anything German tank designers had attempted during the war. A high-speed gyroscope spinning at 12,000 revolutions per minute served as the angular reference device. This gyroscope, maintained in precise orientation by its rotational momentum, detected any change in the gun's vertical angle caused by the tank's movement over uneven terrain. The moment the tank pitched forward, crossing a ditch or rocked backward climbing a slope, the gyroscope sensed the deviation from the gunner's selected elevation. Hydraulic power, drawn from the same turret drive system that rotated the turret, fed into a servo mechanism connected directly to the gun mount through a hydraulic cylinder. When the gyroscope detected unwanted gun movement, the hydraulic system instantly applied corrective force to maintain the gun's elevation setting, regardless of the tank's hull motion. The gunner controlled the system through 2 primary interfaces. A manual control box allowed him to set desired gun elevation while the stabilizer was active. The gun's elevation could be adjusted smoothly through the hydraulic system, while the gyroscope continuously compensated for vehicle motion. The main telescope sight, mounted on top of the turret with its eyepiece inside, gave the gunner superior situational awareness compared to German tanks where gunners viewed the world only through coaxial sights mounted parallel to the main gun. The stabilizer was designed to function at speeds up to 15 miles per hour across moderately rough terrain, maintaining gun elevation within 1/8 of a degree, or 2 mils, of the gunner's selected setting. This precision, achieved through 1940s analog mechanical and hydraulic technology, gave American tank gunners a capability German tankers never possessed during World War II. German tank doctrine, refined through years of armoured warfare across Europe and Russia, demanded that tanks halt before firing their main guns. This wasn't superstition or outdated thinking. It was sound tactical doctrine, based on the mechanical realities of German tank design. Panzer III, Panzer IV, Panther, and Tiger tanks lacked any form of gun stabilization. Their fire control systems consisted of the gun itself, manually traversed and elevated by the gunner, with aiming accomplished through optical sights rigidly connected to the gun tube. When a German tank moved, its gun moved with the hull. Every bump, every ditch, every change in ground elevation translated directly into gun displacement. The gunner's sight picture bounced and swayed continuously. Accurate fire was impossible until the tank stopped and the gun settled into a stable position. German tankers, therefore, approached every engagement as a tactical geometry problem requiring positional advantage. Identify the enemy, maneuver to optimal range and angle, find solid ground, come to a complete stop, allow the suspension to settle, acquire the target through the sight, make final elevation and traverse, adjustments. Fire. This process, when executed by experienced crews with good terrain and clear sight lines, produced devastating results. German long-range gunnery, conducted from carefully chosen static positions, destroyed Allied tanks at distances exceeding 2,000 yards. The 88mm gun of the Tiger I could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armour from beyond effective American return fire range. The Panther's 75mm K-Go K-42 litres 70 gun possessed similar capabilities. In a static gunnery duel at long range, German tanks held every advantage except one. They had to be stationary to use those advantages effectively. American tank doctrine entering World War II didn't envision tanks fighting other tanks as their primary mission. Field Manual FM 18-5, Organization and Tactics of Tank Destroyer Units, published June 16, 1942, explicitly stated that armoured forces were organized, trained, and equipped for offensive operations against vital objectives deep in hostile rear areas. Tank destroyer battalions, equipped with towed anti-tank guns and later with self-propelled guns on light chassis, were supposed to handle enemy armour. Medium tanks like the Sherman were intended to exploit breakthroughs, disrupt enemy rear areas, and support infantry operations. Tank versus tank combat, in American pre-war thinking, was a sideshow that distracted from the primary exploitation mission. Reality on North African battlefields in 1942 and 1943 shattered this doctrinal framework immediately. American tankers found themselves fighting German tanks regularly, not occasionally. The tank destroyer concept, theoretically sound, proved inadequate in practice. Tank destroyers, even more lightly armoured than Shermans and equipped with open-topped turrets, took heavy casualties. Their theoretical advantage mobility, allowing them to shoot and scoot, meant little against dug-in German tanks or in close terrain, where rapid repositioning was impossible. Increasingly, Sherman crews found themselves in the tank versus tank fights their doctrine said they should avoid. They had to adapt or die. The Sherman's gyrostabilizer, initially installed simply because American automotive engineering had developed the technology and military specifications called for its inclusion, became the foundation of a tactical revolution that American tankers discovered through necessity rather than design. In 1943 and early 1944, most Sherman crews barely used the stabilizer. Training was inadequate. Many armour units received their tanks with perhaps some manuals, but often didn't have a single man in their company who really understood how to make the stabilizer work properly. The system required careful setup. The auxiliary generator had to run continuously, while the stabilizer operated to avoid draining the batteries. The tank's speed needed to be held as constant as possible. The engine had to run at full governed speed when the stabilizer was active. Lower gears were used if lower speeds were desired while maintaining maximum engine RPM for consistent hydraulic power. Many crews, lacking proper training and unclear about the system's benefits, simply turned it off. They fought the way German tankers fought. Find good ground, stop, shoot. This made sense given their training and the Sherman's limitations in frontal armor and gun penetration against late-war German tanks. A Sherman could not penetrate a Panther's frontal glacis armor from any practical range. A Sherman could not penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor except at very close range with the later 76mm gun. In a static gunnery duel at medium to long range, German tanks possessed overwhelming technical superiority. But something began changing during the summer and fall of 1944 as American armored divisions pushed deeper into France and approached the German border. Veterans who survived their first encounters with German armor started experimenting with different tactics. They noticed that German tanks, for all their fearsome reputations, always did the same thing. They stopped to shoot. This created a predictable pattern. The German tank would identify a target, maneuver to advantageous position, halt, acquire aim, fire. During the halt phase, even a Tiger became vulnerable. Its armor meant nothing if an American tanker could hit its thinner side or rear plates. Its superior gun was irrelevant if it wasn't pointed at the attacker. Some Sherman crews, particularly those in veteran units with experienced non-commissioned officers and officers who encouraged initiative, began using the gyrostabilizer the way Westinghouse engineers had designed it to function. They discovered that firing while moving at 10 to 15 miles per hour with the stabilizer active gave them a shocking tactical advantage. The German tank would stop to shoot. The Sherman would keep moving, maintaining or changing angle, while the gunner used the stabilized sight to track the target and adjust point of aim. The American tank became a mobile firing platform, while the German tank became a stationary target. The mathematics of this tactical shift were brutal and simple. A stationary target could be ranged precisely. A moving target required the enemy gunner to calculate lead, estimate speed, and account for his own tank's motion if he tried returning fire while moving, which German tanks couldn't do accurately without stabilization. Even if a German tanker got off the first shot, if that shot missed or failed to disable the Sherman immediately, the American crew had time for multiple follow-up shots while continuing to move and maneuver. Every second the Sherman stayed mobile was a second the German gunner had to recalculate his shot while his target's position changed. This didn't mean Shermans could suddenly penetrate Panther frontal armor. It meant Sherman crews stopped trying to penetrate Panther frontal armor. They used movement to create angles, to get shots at side armor, to force German tanks to rotate their turrets and expose vulnerable points. A Panther sitting still, perfectly positioned for frontal engagement, became far less dangerous when American tankers simply refused to fight on those terms. They moved laterally, forced the German tank to traverse its turret, close distance while moving, and shot for weak points that no amount of frontal glacis armor could protect. The 3rd Armored Division, pushing through Belgium and into Germany during November and December of 1944, developed reputation for aggressive tank versus tank tactics that emphasized movement and rate of fire over positional advantage. After-action reports from 3rd Armored engagements during this period documented Sherman crews deliberately maintaining movement during firefights, using the stabilizer to maintain aim while maneuvering, and achieving kill-to-loss ratios that contradicted the prevailing narrative about Sherman inferiority. A 1946 study by the U.S. Army's Ballistic Research Laboratory examined 30 armor-on-armor engagements fought by the 3rd and 4th Armored Divisions during 1944. The study found that Sherman tanks achieved a 3.6-to-1 kill ratio against German Panther tanks in these engagements. This ratio, seemingly impossible given the technical specifications strongly favoring the Panther, reflected not superior American equipment, but superior American tactics enabled by equipment German tanks lacked. German doctrine required static gunnery. American crews discovered they could avoid static gunnery entirely by using the one piece of equipment that allowed accurate fire while moving. The stabilizer didn't make Shermans invulnerable. It made them unpredictable. And in armored combat, unpredictability, combined with superior numbers, created conditions where technical inferiority in armor and gun could be overcome through tactical superiority in movement and fire rate. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 and January 1945 provided the largest test case for these evolved Sherman tactics. German armoured formations, including Panthers and Tigers, launched a massive counter-offensive through the Ardennes, achieving initial surprise and inflicting heavy casualties. American tank units, including numerous Sherman battalions, fought defensive actions under conditions favouring German long-range gunnery, snow-covered open ground, limited concealment, and German tanks fighting from carefully prepared positions. Traditional analysis suggests this should have been catastrophic for Sherman units. The reality proved more complex. Sherman crews, particularly in veteran units, used movement as both defensive and offensive tool. When German tanks appeared at long range, Sherman crews didn't attempt impossible frontal penetrations. They moved, they used terrain, they closed distance while using the stabilizer to maintain ability to return fire. When German tanks stopped to shoot, which they always did because their doctrine and equipment demanded it, Sherman gunners already had their sights on target, gun stabilized, ready to fire the moment an angle presented itself. The Sherman's faster rate of fire, approximately 20 rounds per minute for the 75mm gun versus 6 to 7 rounds per minute for the Panzer's 75mm gun, meant American crews could put multiple rounds into the fight while German crews were still loading their second shot. The mathematics became even more favourable when factoring in German mechanical reliability problems. Panthers and Tigers broke down frequently. Final drives on Panthers, designed for a 35-ton tank but stressed by the actual 45-ton combat weight, averaged only 150 kilometers before requiring complete replacement. Maybach engines in both Panthers and Tigers suffered chronic overheating, oil leaks, and connecting rod failures. French post-war technical evaluations of captured Panthers documented average engine life of only 1,000 kilometers. German tanks that reached the battlefield in working order often couldn't stay in working order. Shermans, built with automotive reliability as fundamental design principle, could stay in the fight for thousands of kilometers without major mechanical intervention. American tankers during the Bulge discovered something German commanders refused to acknowledge. A Sherman with a 75mm gun that remained operational and mobile was infinitely more dangerous than a Panther with a superior gun that sat immobilized by mechanical failure or that had to remain stationary to use its weapons effectively. The tank that could maintain mobility, maintain rate of fire, and maintain operational availability dominated the tank that possessed superior specifications but couldn't exploit those specifications without abandoning mobility. The tactical doctrine shift, represented by Sherman crews firing on the move, created a cascade of advantages that compounded in ways individual technical specifications could never predict. Consider the decision tree facing a German Panther commander encountering a Sherman at 800 yards in open terrain during late 1944, according to German doctrine, refined through years of armoured warfare. Identify the target, maneuver to optimal position if necessary, halt on solid ground, allow suspension to settle, acquire target through gun sight, adjust for range and deflection, fire. This process, executed by an experienced crew, took between 20 and 40 seconds from target identification to first shot. Now consider the same encounter from the Sherman crew's perspective, if they chose to employ the stabilizer and fire on the move. The commander identifies the Panther through his cupola periscope. He designates the target to his gunner using the commander's override controls or verbal direction. The gunner acquires the target through his turret-mounted telescope, which provides superior visibility compared to German coaxial sights. The driver maintains steady speed between 10 and 15 miles per hour, engine at full governed RPM, keeping vehicle motion as consistent as possible. The gunner activates the stabilizer, adjusting elevation through the hydraulic control box while the gyroscope compensates for vehicle pitch and roll. The loader chambers a 75mm round. The gunner tracks the target while the Sherman continues moving, closing distance or changing angle to the Panther's position. When the gunner achieves acceptable sight picture on a vulnerable area, side armor, rear deck, turret ring, lower hull, he fires. Time from target identification to first shot, 10 to 15 seconds. And critically, the Sherman never stopped moving. The Panther crew, following their doctrine, completed their halt procedure and fired first. Perhaps their first shot missed because the Sherman's movement made range estimation difficult. Perhaps it hit but failed to penetrate, striking at a disadvantageous angle because the Sherman's constant motion prevented the German gunner from selecting optimal impact point. The Panther, now stationary, became a fixed target. The Sherman gunner, sight already on target and stabilized, made a minor elevation correction and fired his second shot within 6 seconds. The loader, working in the Sherman's relatively spacious turret, chambered a third round. The Sherman's rate of fire advantage meant 3 American rounds in the time required for the Panther crew to load and fire their second shot. This tactical mathematics, repeated across thousands of engagements during the final months of the war, produced outcomes that defied expectations based purely on armor thickness and gun penetration values. German tanks possessed superior specifications in nearly every measurable category: thicker armor, more powerful guns, better frontal protection. But specifications assumed static gunnery, where both combatants fought from fixed positions. When one combatant refused to fight statically, when one side maintained mobility and used that mobility to create tactical opportunities, the specifications became less relevant than the tactical doctrine. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Sherman's gyrostabilizer provided additional advantages beyond enabling fire on the move that became apparent to crews who mastered its use. The stabilizer allowed much faster engagement when transitioning from movement to halt. A Sherman crew using the stabilizer could maintain their gun pointed at a target area while moving, then stop and fire almost immediately because the gun was already on target and stabilized. A German crew, moving with their unstabilized gun bouncing and swaying, had to wait after halting for the suspension to settle, the gun to stop moving, and the sight picture to stabilize before they could acquire an accurate aim. This engagement time advantage, measured in seconds, often determined who fired first in unexpected encounters at close range. The British Army, which received thousands of M4 Shermans through Lend-Lease, largely ignored the gyrostabilizer. British doctrine and training manuals instructed crews to turn the stabilizer off. British tankers, fighting in similar terrain against the same German opponents, suffered higher loss rates and achieved lower kill ratios than American units employing the stabilizer. The difference wasn't the tanks. Britain and America often operated identical Sherman models. The difference was doctrine and training. American crews, particularly in veteran divisions by late 1944, had learned through hard experience that the stabilizer provided decisive advantages if used properly. British crews, following doctrine that dismissed the stabilizer as unnecessary complication, fought without it and paid the price. Soviet forces, which received over 4,000 M4A2 Shermans through Lend-Lease, also generally ignored the stabilizer system. Soviet tank doctrine emphasized shock action, mass assault, and overwhelming numerical superiority. Soviet crews found the Sherman vastly superior to their T-34 tanks in terms of crew comfort, visibility, and mechanical reliability, but they didn't develop the fire-on-the-move tactics that American crews pioneered. The Red Army considered the M4A2 much less prone to catch fire than the T-34, 76 due to ammunition fires, and Soviet armored units by 1945, sometimes equipped entirely with Shermans, spoke highly of the vehicle's qualities. But without the tactical doctrine to exploit the stabilizer, Soviet Sherman crews fought much the way their T-34 crews fought: aggressive maneuver, followed by static gunnery. This pattern-identical equipment, producing vastly different results based on doctrine and training, demonstrates that weapons alone don't determine battlefield outcomes. Systems determine outcomes. The Sherman succeeded not because it was the best tank by individual specifications, but because American armored forces developed a complete system that integrated the tank's unique capabilities into tactical doctrine that exploited those capabilities fully. German forces possessed superior individual tanks but never developed doctrine to counter American mobile gunnery because their own tanks couldn't perform mobile gunnery effectively. The technical reasons why German tanks couldn't match Sherman fire-on-the-move capability reveal fundamental differences in design philosophy. The Panther's main gun, the 7.5 cm KAK 42 litres 70, produced significantly higher recoil forces than the Sherman's 75 mm M3 gun. This recoil, in an unstabilized mounting, caused greater gun displacement when fired from an unstable platform. The Panther's torsion bar suspension, while providing good cross-country performance, transmitted considerable vibration and motion to the hull when moving at speed. The Panther's turret traverse system operated hydraulically, but drew power from engine RPM, meaning traverse speed varied with engine speed. At low RPM, or when the engine wasn't running, traverse became extremely slow or impossible. The Sherman's electric auxiliary generator powered independent turret traverse, allowing consistent turret rotation regardless of engine speed or even with the main engine stopped. These seemingly minor technical details accumulated into fundamental tactical limitations. A Panther crew attempting to acquire and track a moving target while their own vehicle moved faced enormous challenges. The gun bounced with hull motion. The turret traverse speed varied unpredictably. The recoil from firing threw the gun significantly off target. The gunner's limited visibility through the coaxial sight made tracking difficult. Every factor pushed German crews towards static gunnery, where these problems disappeared. Stop the tank, steady the platform, use the excellent optics and powerful gun to destroy targets from prepared positions. This doctrine worked brilliantly when German forces fought defensively from carefully selected positions against attackers who fought the same way. It failed catastrophically when American tankers simply refused to fight on German terms. By maintaining movement, Sherman crews forced German tanks to track moving targets, something their equipment and training made extremely difficult. By using the stabilizer to maintain aim while moving, American gunners could fire accurately under conditions that made German return fire nearly impossible. By accepting that they couldn't penetrate Panther frontal armor, American crews stopped trying to penetrate Panther frontal armor and instead used movement to create shots at vulnerable areas. Tactical adaptation overcame technical inferiority. The Germans, observing this tactical shift, attempted various countermeasures. Some Panther units tried firing at moving Shermans from static positions, accepting lower hit probability in exchange for maintaining positional advantage. This worked when German crews had excellent range estimation, clear fields of fire, and first shot capability. It failed when American crews closed distance rapidly, used terrain to mask their approach, or simply absorbed the first shot without catastrophic damage and continued advancing. Late-war German armor tactics increasingly emphasized ambush positions in close-terrain villages, forests, hedgerows, where American mobility advantages decreased, and where German tanks could engage at ranges their guns dominated. But close terrain created its own problems for German tanks. Panthers and Tigers, designed for open battlefield combat with emphasis on long-range gunnery, proved less effective in urban fighting or wooded areas where engagement ranges dropped to under 300 yards. At close range, Sherman crews could penetrate German armor more reliably. At close range, German turret traverse speed disadvantages became critical. At close range, the Sherman's faster rate of fire and better crew visibility gave American crews decisive advantages. German tanks designed to dominate at 1,500 to 2,000 yards found themselves fighting at 200 yards, where their technical superiority meant far less. 3rd Armored Division after-action reports from December 1944 through March 1945 document this tactical evolution in detail. Unit histories record numerous engagements where Sherman platoons encountered German armor in villages, forests, and broken terrain. The pattern repeated consistently. German tanks would attempt to establish advantageous positions. American tanks would maintain movement while closing distance. German crews would fire from static positions, achieving mixed results. American crews would continue advancing while returning fire. Engagement ranges would decrease until Sherman guns could penetrate German armor reliably. German tanks would withdraw or be destroyed. The casualty ratios in these engagements favored American forces, despite German technical advantages, because American tactics exploited German tactical rigidity. Individual American tank aces demonstrated what fire-on-the-move capability could achieve in the hands of skilled crews. Staff Sergeant Lafayette G. Poole of the 3rd Armored Division, fighting in an M4A1 Sherman named In the Mood, destroyed 12 German tanks among his total of 258 enemy vehicles in less than 3 months of combat during summer and fall, 1944. Poole's crew mastered the stabilizer and developed aggressive tactics, emphasizing movement and rapid fire. Poole would advance directly toward German positions, using the stabilizer to maintain aim, while his driver maneuvered for optimal angles, firing multiple rounds in quick succession. German tanks attempting to engage Poole's Sherman often found themselves taking fire from unexpected angles, as Poole's driver constantly changed position while the stabilized gun stayed on target. Poole's tactics worked until September 21, 1944, when his Sherman took 2 hits from a Panther that caught Poole's crew during a halt for reconsolidation. Poole lost his leg but survived. His combat career ended by one of the few times he stopped moving. His replacement crew, less experienced with the stabilizer and fire-on-the-move tactics, suffered higher casualties. The difference wasn't the tank, it was the tactics and the crew's proficiency with the equipment that made those tactics possible. Canadian forces produced the top Allied tank ace of the war, Lieutenant Sidney Valpy Radley Walters, who destroyed 18 German tanks fighting in Shermans with the Canadian Army. Radley Walters, like Poole, emphasized aggressive movement and used the Sherman's stabilizer to maintain offensive pressure. He recognized that German tanks possessed superior specifications but inferior tactical flexibility. By forcing German tanks to react to his movements rather than executing their preferred static gunnery, Radley Walters created engagements where Sherman advantages in rate of fire, mechanical reliability, and crew visibility outweighed German advantages in armor and gunpowder. The broader statistical picture confirms what individual aces demonstrated. U.S. Army tank losses in the European Theatre of Operations from June 6, 1944 through May 15, 1945 totaled approximately 7,000 armoured vehicles, including 4,300 M4 Sherman tanks. German tank losses during the same period on the Western Front exceeded 10,000 vehicles. More significantly, the majority of American tank losses came from anti-tank guns, mines, and infantry anti-tank weapons, not from German tanks. Tank versus tank combat, the engagement type where German technical superiority should have been most decisive, accounted for less than 30% of American tank losses. This distribution of losses reveals that German tanks, despite their fearsome reputations and impressive specifications, didn't dominate American armor on the battlefield. Anti-tank guns destroyed more Shermans than Panthers or Tigers. Panzer IV rocket launchers, handheld weapons that infantry could use from concealment at close range, killed more American tankers than German tank main guns. The decisive battles of the Western Front weren't Sherman versus Panther duels at long range. They were combined arms engagements where American mobility, logistics, air support, artillery, and numerical superiority overwhelmed German defensive positions despite local German technical advantages. The Sherman's ability to fire on the move factored into this combined arms success in ways beyond simple tank versus tank kill ratios. American armor doctrine by late 1944 emphasized close cooperation with infantry, artillery, and air support. Sherman crews advancing with infantry could provide suppressive fire on German positions while continuing to advance, something German tanks couldn't do effectively. Sherman platoons supporting infantry assaults could engage German machine gun positions, anti-tank guns, and fortifications with high explosive rounds while maintaining forward momentum. This mobile fire support kept German defenders suppressed and prevented them from organizing effective counterfire. German defenders, watching American combined arms assaults, faced impossible tactical problems. Anti-tank guns were effective against Shermans but vulnerable to artillery, airstrikes, and suppressive fire from other Shermans. German tanks could engage American armor, but exposing themselves made them vulnerable to American tank destroyers, fighter bombers, and artillery. Infantry with Panzerfausts could destroy Shermans at close range, but couldn't survive in open terrain against American artillery and machine gun fire. Every German defensive asset had an American counter, and American forces possessed enough of every asset type to overwhelm German positions through sustained pressure. The Sherman's mobility and reliability enabled this sustained pressure in ways German tanks couldn't match. A Sherman battalion could operate for days or weeks continuously with minimal mechanical breakdown. Crews could sleep in or near their tanks, perform field maintenance quickly with minimal tools, receive supplies easily because Sherman parts were standardized and available, and return disabled vehicles to service rapidly because Sherman repairs were straightforward. A Panther battalion, by contrast, required extensive maintenance support, specialized tools, trained technicians, and constant attention to prevent mechanical failures. Panthers spent more time undergoing maintenance than operating. Sherman spent more time operating than undergoing maintenance. This operational tempo advantage compounded over time. American armored divisions maintained consistent pressure because their tanks stayed operational. German armored units couldn't maintain consistent pressure because their tanks broke down constantly. Even when German tanks achieved tactical victories in individual engagements, destroying multiple Shermans before being knocked out themselves, the strategic situation never improved because American tanks returned to service quickly, while German tanks didn't. A Sherman damaged by a penetrating hit might return to service within days if the crew survived, and the damage was repairable. A Panther with a thrown track or seized final drive might sit immobilized for weeks waiting for parts and technicians who never arrived. The culmination of American fire-on-the-move tactics came during the final Allied offensives into Germany during March and April 1945. American armored divisions, spearheaded by Sherman battalions using the tactics developed over months of combat, advanced rapidly against disintegrating German resistance. German armor, decimated by casualties, mechanical failures, and fuel shortages, couldn't mount effective counterattacks. The roads across western Germany filled with abandoned German tanks, many never engaged by Allied forces, simply left behind when they broke down and couldn't be repaired or recovered. American tankers rolling through these abandoned tank graveyards saw Panthers, Tigers, and King Tigers sitting immobile with thrown tracks, seized engines, broken final drives, German tanks that had never fired a shot in combat, destroyed by their own mechanical complexity and inadequate logistics. Meanwhile, American Sherman columns continued advancing, their tanks running reliably, their crews confident in equipment that worked consistently, their tactical doctrine proven through 8 months of sustained combat against supposedly superior opponents. The German army, analyzing their defeat after the war, identified numerous factors: Allied air superiority, overwhelming material advantage, strategic mistakes, fuel shortages, numerical inferiority. Few German analyses acknowledged that American tactical doctrine, particularly the fire-on-the-move tactics enabled by the Sherman's gyrostabilizer, had fundamentally changed the nature of armored combat in ways German doctrine couldn't counter. German tank design philosophy, emphasizing individual vehicle superiority and static gunnery, proved inadequate against an opponent who refused to fight statically and who possessed enough numerical superiority to absorb tactical losses while maintaining operational momentum. Post-war analysis by military professionals worldwide reached similar conclusions. The French army, operating captured Panthers from 1946 to 1950 in the 5001st and 5003rd Armoured Regiments, documented every mechanical failure and operational limitation. Their 1947 technical report, Le Panther, became the definitive assessment of the vehicle's true performance. The report confirmed the 150-kilometre final drive life, the 1,000-kilometre engine life, the maintenance difficulties, the crew discomfort, the tactical limitations. French engineers and tankers, initially impressed by the Panther's specifications, concluded that the Sherman was the superior combat vehicle when all factors were considered. British post-war evaluations reached identical conclusions. British forces completed 9 additional Panthers using captured German components and German technicians at a commandeered assembly facility. These British-built Panthers underwent standard acceptance trials. The trials had to be halted when the last working Panther damaged its transmission during a hill-climbing test. All other Panthers had already been cannibalized for spare parts or broken down from mechanical failures. The conclusive British report from February 1948 stated that very little information of any value was obtained due to the general mechanical unreliability of the Panther and Jagd Panther tanks. American testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland examined captured Panthers and Tigers extensively. American engineers recognized the advanced features but documented numerous flaws. The knowledge gained influenced post-war American tank development, though not by copying German systems. Rather, American engineers learned what not to do, how over-optimization for specific parameters creates systems that fail under operational stress, how complexity without corresponding reliability produces unusable weapons, how impressive specifications mean nothing if the vehicle cannot be sustained in combat. The developmental legacy of the Sherman's gyrostabilizer extended far beyond World War II. Soviet tank designers, observing American fire-on-the-move capability, developed improved gun stabilizers for post-war tanks. The T-54, a medium tank, introduced in the early 1950s, featured stabilization in both elevation and traverse, becoming the first Soviet production tank with full 2-axis stabilization. This capability became standard on virtually all subsequent Soviet tank designs. The Soviets recognized what they had missed during the war. Stabilization provided decisive tactical advantages that raw gun power or armor thickness couldn't match. British tank designers, already familiar with stabilization from their own research and from examining American systems, incorporated improved stabilizers into the Centurion tank, introduced in 1945. The Centurion featured the first 2-plane stabilization system in a production tank, stabilizing both gun elevation and turret traverse. This allowed British tankers to engage targets accurately while moving, a capability that made the Centurion one of the most successful tank designs of the post-war era. Interestingly, American tank development abandoned stabilization temporarily after World War II. Post-war U.S. tanks were produced without gyrostabilizers until the M60A2 in the early 1970s. This decision reflected changed priorities and different operational requirements during the early Cold War. However, when the U.S. Army resumed development of advanced fire control systems during the 1960s and 70s, stabilization returned as absolutely fundamental. Modern American main battle tanks like the M1 Abrams feature sophisticated digital stabilization systems that descend directly from Clinton R. Hanna's 1941 anticipating gyro design. The principle remains identical. Keep the gun pointed where the gunner aims it, regardless of vehicle motion. German post-war tank development took very different paths. West Germany's Bundeswehr, developing the Leopard 1 main battle tank during the 1950s, consciously emphasized reliability and maintainability over pure performance specifications. They studied American automotive engineering principles from Sherman development and deliberately applied them to military vehicle design. The Leopard 1 incorporated design philosophies that made the Sherman successful. Robust powertrain with substantial design margins, easy maintenance requiring minimal specialized tools, standardized components enabling rapid field repairs, growth potential allowing future upgrades. The Leopard 1 also featured full stabilization, acknowledging what German wartime doctrine had never accepted. Mobile gunnery required stabilized weapons. The lessons learned through Sherman combat experience, particularly the tactical advantages of fire-on-the-move capability, became foundational to modern tank warfare. Every contemporary main battle tank features sophisticated stabilization systems, allowing accurate fire while moving at high speeds across rough terrain. Modern tank gunnery training emphasizes shooting on the move as standard practice, not exceptional technique. Tank commanders expect their crews to engage targets effectively while maintaining mobility. The fire and maneuver tactics that American Sherman crews pioneered during 1944 and 1945 became codified doctrine taught at armor schools worldwide. The mathematics of armored warfare were indeed rewritten, not through superior firepower or armor thickness, but through automotive excellence that refused to break and through tactical innovation that refused to fight on enemy terms. The Sherman tank didn't win World War II through technical superiority in any single specification. It won through industrial superiority expressed as mechanical reliability, consistent availability, and ease of maintenance. It won through tactical superiority expressed as fire-on-the-move capability that German doctrine couldn't counter and German equipment couldn't match. It won because American tankers discovered that the piece of equipment many of them initially ignored, the Westinghouse gyrostabilizer, gave them the ability to fight in ways that rendered German technical advantages irrelevant. Sergeant Bill Preston, the tanker who fired on the move that morning in November 1944, survived the war. His Sherman, battered but functional, rolled into Germany during the final weeks of the conflict. Preston participated in dozens more engagements, always firing on the move when terrain and situation permitted, always maintaining momentum rather than accepting static duels. He destroyed 6 German tanks confirmed, including 2 Panthers, without ever penetrating frontal armor. Every kill came from side or rear shots taken while his Sherman was moving, using the stabilizer to maintain aim while his driver maneuvered for angles. Preston's individual success, multiplied across thousands of American tank crews who mastered the same tactics, transformed American armored forces from a supposedly outmatched opponent into a dominant battlefield force. The 3-to-1 improvement in kill ratios when firing on the move versus fighting statically wasn't propaganda or statistical manipulation. It was the quantified result of tactical innovation enabled by technological capability. American tankers learned to leverage the one advantage they possessed that German tankers lacked, and that single advantage, properly exploited, proved more decisive than all the armor thickness and gun penetration specifications that supposedly determined armored combat outcomes. The war ended in May 1945 with American Shermans rolling through Berlin while abandoned German tanks littered the roads across Germany. The debate about which tank was superior never should have existed. The answer was always obvious to those who understood that effectiveness in war is measured not by specifications but by results. The Sherman achieved results. The German tanks, for all their impressive engineering and fearsome reputations, didn't achieve the results they needed to win. History delivered its verdict through outcomes, not through armor thickness measurements or gun penetration tables. The side that built reliable tanks, developed effective tactics, and trained crews to exploit their equipment's unique capabilities defeated the side with superior individual weapons but inferior systemic integration. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.